Welcome to Riverside Albert. The sermon today is called The War to End All Wars. The reason you find that context, that saying, familiar is because World War I was called the War to End All Wars. Because it was so horrible. Trench warfare with many thousands of people dying in the mud. There was all sorts of things. You could be walking along and the path changed every day because of shelling, and this is the path and it's dark and you got to get there, and you step off the path and you could fall into a 7 or 8 foot deep hole full of water, and you have 70 pounds on your back and you could die from that. There was disease, there was infections, there was all sorts of things that killed as many as bullets did. There was trench foot, that you would lose your feet. There was also the mustard gas that they used that killed a lot of people. Now, there was also many people who had no business being in the war. I have a book here, old enough to fight. It's about Canadian soldiers in the First World War, Canadian boy soldiers. Some of them as young as 13 and a half years old. Let me read you a couple short texts from here. In the mist and the smoke, he came upon Private John Raw on his knees, with helmet off and arms at his side, his face turned to the sky. There was on his face a look of most joyous astonishment, recalled Caddy, who also remembered shouting to his friend, wondering why he had stopped to kneel in such a time. As I moved around in front of him, to the other side, I saw the blood gushing from his neck. I knew he was finished. There was nothing I could do. Confessing after the battle that he was not a religious man, Caddy said he would give a lot to know what that young soldier saw in the sky with his life's blood ebbing away. Here's another excerpt. Waiting was the hardest part. New to battle, he was listening to a few stories about men who, taking a direct hit, that would be from a shell, were turned into pink vapor, and about others whose lifeless bodies showed no outward sign of concussion, but whose bones were pulverized. Those were some of the things these young boys dealt with. And that was why it was called the War to End All Wars. It was, everyone universally thought we can't do this again to ourselves and to other people. How can we do this? So this must be the last of wars. Well, that's not the reason that this war, when the Israelites went into the promised land to fight against the people in that land, is called the War to End All Wars. There was another reason, and this is said a number of times, but I'll read where Solomon was saying the same thing again in 1 Kings 8, 41 to 43. Also considering the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, when he comes from a far country for your name's sake. For they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. When he comes and prays toward this house, here in heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all which the foreigner calls to you, in order that all the people of the earth may know your name, to fear you, and do as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house which I build is called by your name. The reason that this was the war to end all wars is that Israel had obeyed the Lord and did what he said. God won the victories for him. If you read through the book of Joshua, it tells about how God sent hailstones to kill more than the sword killed. How he did all sorts of things that he won the battle. So the first thing a king would think about is, I'm going to war with Israel, but wait a minute. Do I really want God to fight against me? How can I win that battle? And they wouldn't come. And the other reason is, the very thing, the most important thing in all the world that you want, that you would ask for from Israel, they will give away for free. That was the whole point. God said, you make it my the worship of me so inviting, and people will see how much you're blessed, that they'll come and ask you for the reason that this is happening. And you can give it away for free. You would give away the fact that God wants you to have a personal relationship with him. It says in the Bible how one would chase 1,000 and two would chase 10,000. This is what would happen to Israel if they didn't worship God properly. They would lose the battles. But the same was true if they were worshiping God. One would chase away 1,000. Now, this is a very odd battle, and I want to look at this in Joshua. This battle for the Promised Land is very odd. Let's look at the first one. The first part of this battle is not really a battle, and I call it the woman in Jesus' lineage. And it's Joshua 2, verse 3. I'm going to read verse 1. And Joshua the son of Nun sent two men as spies secretly, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And the woman kept and hid those. In verse 14 it says, "So the men said to her, 'Our life for yours. If you do not tell the business of ours, it shall come about that when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you.'" So this woman, Rahab the harlot, she got a whole chapter in this book. There's really only 11 chapters of the conquest of Promised Land. Of that, she gets one whole chapter plus 4 more verses. Chapter 6, this is where in chapter 6 she gets 4 verses. It said, chapter 6 and verse 17, "The city shall be under the ban, and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all that is with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messages that were sent." In verse 21 to 22, Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there that you sworn to her." So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab the harlot, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all she had. She also brought out all her relations and placed them outside the camp of Israel. And it says in 25, "However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out the land." These 2 men, you've heard that expression, reconnoiter. It's a great word. Reconnoiter. They were coming to search out the land, and Rahab said, in essence, "I believe in God. I believe that God is the God that he will win. This battle is already won. I believe in God. Please save me." And she got more space than the whole Battle of Jericho. If you read the Battle of Jericho, she gets more space. Well, the next part of this battle, after these 2 spies got back, is I call it a good show of strength. Joshua 3, verse 15 and 16. Joshua 3 says, "And those who were carrying the ark went into the Jordan. The feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflowed all its banks at the days of harvest. And the water which was flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap, a great distance away, at Adam, the city." Now, so this is the great show of strength. They're going to walk across on dry land, across the Jordan, which is overthrowing its banks, and they're going to, well, everyone's going to see this. Up into the city of Adam, the water was piled up there. And just to let you know, I've tried all 3. I've piled snow, I've piled ice, but I've never been able to pile water. It's very difficult to pile water. God did it. That's a great show of strength. Well, the next part of this is complete weakness. Total weakness. It's really incredible. When you go into a battle, you want to be your strongest possible. You're in enemy territory, you have to be as strong as possible because you're going to be attacked. Well, this is what God did. As soon as they got across the Jordan, in chapter 5, verse 7, their children whom he raised up in that place, Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not been circumcising them along the way. And when they had finished circumcising all the nation, they remained in their place in the camp until they were healed. So now they were in enemy territory. They were at an absolute total weakness. Every man from 8 days old to 60 years old was circumcised. Can't do anything. Can't fight, can't hardly walk, can very well just move around a little bit. And this is for a month, up to a month. And the only 4 men left to defend the entire nation of 2 million people is Joshua and Caleb and the 2 sons of Aaron, because they're already circumcised. What a show of weakness. But God was able to protect the whole tribe. No one came, no one attacked. Now everyone's healed, and let's go to the next part of this war. And I call this the War of Walks, the Battle of Jericho. And you know the story. They walked around once, twice, second day. Once again the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 7 times on the 7th day. And the walls came down. And as you know, God said everything in it is under the ban. You're to burn everything except the silver and the gold and the bronze and the iron, which are going to be saved for me. Except what belongs to Rahab. Everything that she owns, she gets to keep. And the family that she has in her house. Now I'm thinking of this. Remember, the men arrived. She hid them. She sent them away. So they said, you store everyone, keep everyone in your house who you want to save, because when the battle starts, everything will be destroyed. So how long did she keep these people in the house? And how long did she have to work at convincing them that God was God, and he would do this? And you have to stay, and you have to not tell anybody, because we'll all die for being traitors. And they had to go back. They had to come across the Jordan. They spent 30 days until they were healed, and then they spent a week walking around. How long did they stay in her house? Well, God protected them because no one asked that question. Why are you all staying in the house? God was going to save this woman. Well, in 7 verse 1, it says here, they made one mistake. But the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully in regard to the things under the ban. For Achan, the son of Camri, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerach, from the tribe of Judah, took some of the things under the ban. Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel. Now you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, why is God mad at the sons of Israel when one man did something? That seems over the top. 2 million people God is mad at because one man did something wrong. Well, that brings us to the next point. We can do this on our own. So the people, Joshua sent them to Ai to see what it was like. We can do this on our own, they said. They returned to Joshua and said to him, do not let all the people go up. Only about 2,000 or 3,000 men need to go up to Ai. Do not make all the people toil up there, for they are few. So about 3,000 men from the people went up there, but they fled from the people of Ai. And the men of Ai struck down about 36 of their men and pursued them from the gate as far as, and on and on. They lost. They lost completely, badly. But I want you to notice two things here. Joshua failed to pray. He failed to say, are we good to go? Lord, I prayed about this other battle, the battle of Jericho. What about the battle of Ai? Why didn't the leaders of Israel come up and say, Joshua, let's pray about this before we commit to sending 3,000 men? Well, they didn't. And that's why God is mad at them. He's mad at them because he judged them as one man because they failed to ask the most important question. And so Joshua is upset now, and he's on his knees. And so the Lord said to Joshua, rise up. Why is it you have fallen on your face? Israel has sinned, and they have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them. And they have even taken some of the things under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived. Moreover, they also put them among their own things. So Israel can't stand against their enemy. They're going to lose. It's only me that's making them win. Now, as I say, Joshua should have asked the question. Now, here's something that's important to understand. 3,000 men went up. 36 men died. That's a very, as I went through this battle, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, until the Canadians took it, it was contested. There was back and forth, and 337,000 men died at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. And nothing had happened. They just went back and forth until the Canadians came, and a lot of Canadians died at Vimy Ridge. But they took it. I read battles, one-day battles, 5,000 men killed, 2,000 men killed, 3,000 men killed. 36 of the 3,000 were killed. God was very merciful. Well, they went to Ai, and the story is that they pretended to run before them. Everybody came out. It was a great battle, and they won completely. And so now they have some real estate. And part of that real estate that they own is the part that Joshua was commanded by Moses to stand on that mountain and proclaim the blessings and the curses. And in chapter 8, 30 and 31, then Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, in Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the sons of Israel, as is written in the book of the law of Moses. And so he made an altar, and he had the book of the covenant, and he read it all. And it says after, in 34, then afterward he read all the words of the law, and the blessing and the curses according to all that was written in the book of the law. There was not one word of all that Moses had commanded, which Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, with the women and the little ones and the strangers who were living there. They stopped in the middle of the battle and they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do what Moses told us to do. Well, there's one last story I'm going to share with you. This is in chapter 9. It's called the Guile of the Gibeonites. It says in chapter 9, verse 3, when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they acted craftily and set out as envoys and took out worn sacks for the donkeys. And you know the story. They showed up and they looked like they'd been traveling for a month and a half. And they told them this great story about how they'd come from a long distance and heard about God and heard about how God would defeat all the nations, and they wanted to put together a peace agreement. And Israel asked the important question, how do we know that you're far away? And they were hoping that the people of Israel would see with their eyes and not ask with their heart to God, is this the real God? Are these the real thing? Is this... Well, they didn't. Again, Joshua failed to pray, and they discovered that these people were not far away. In verse 22, then Joshua called them and spoke to them, saying, "Why have you deceived and said, 'We are very far from you, and you're living within us'? Now therefore you are cursed, and you shall never cease being slaves, both hewers of wood and drawers of water for the house of my God." This is a great blessing. He's saying as if it's a curse, but it's a great blessing, because these people would have been killed. When Moses was telling the people, he's saying if they seek peace, but if they don't, you battle them and you destroy them completely. This is the only group that seek peace with Israel. The only group that said, we want to be... And what did Israel do? What did God do? God made them the hewers of wood and the carriers of water for the house of the Lord. They would be more devout than most of the rest of Israel, because they spent all their time near and around and providing for the house of the Lord. What a blessing that would be. And eventually, as they became... the generations passed, they would intermarry, and they would become Jews themselves, and they'd be circumcised, and they would be the best Jews there were. And they wouldn't be slaves forever. But they would still be hewers of wood and drawers of water for the temple, because that's why they were so blessed. Now, when you look at the upper story and the lower story, God in the upper story came down and he talked to Joshua, and he piled up the water at the Jordan River, and he sent hailstones to kill in some of the wars, and he sent all sorts of things, and he is coming into the lower story and doing all these things. And this is really about God. You see, the two people that get the most of this, most of the information, are the Gibeonites and Rahab, because they worship God. They wanted to be part of this. They didn't want to be against. Now, here's something that you have to understand. This is a great war. Here's what it says. Then Joshua, this is 10 verse 36. Then Joshua and all of Israel, 35, they captured it on that day, struck it with the edge of the sword, and utterly destroyed the city. That day, every person that was in it, according to what he'd done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all Israel went up against Eglon to Hebron, and they fought against it and captured it and struck its king. And most of the other kings, most of the other battles got one sentence in this. There's a list, one after another. This king, one sentence. Next king, one sentence. But the Gibeonites got 2 chapters. And Rahab got a chapter and a half. When God does something in the Bible, he does it for a purpose, and no word should go unnoticed. And for him to put so much emphasis on this one woman who became part of the lineage of Jesus and the Gibeonites tells us that how important it is. And you see, if you go to turn to the end of Luke, Jesus has died and rose again, and his disciples are saying, what's up with this? You see, everyone had this idea, and rightly so, that if you worshiped and followed God and did what you were told, God would bless you. he would exceptionally bless you the more that you did it well. And so the disciples now can understand Jesus, who did everything well, who followed God perfectly. He was hung on a cross. How can you put these? You can't square that circle. Well, they're walking along the road, and God meets them. Jesus meets them. And he said to them, "O foolish men, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken." You see, he's saying, all of this is about me. Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in the scriptures. You see, what he was saying to them is, look, the scriptures are about me. They talk about me. And they understood finally, wait, I can put these two together. We think that sometimes we think it has to be and or, not both. And let me tell you this story. Took my car in to get inspected, and they said the front brakes need to be replaced. And so I replaced the front brakes. And I put the tires back on, and I drove the car, and there was this rattly, ticking noise. And I said, I've replaced brakes 50, 60 times. I know how to do this. How come it's ticking? What have I done wrong? Have I got the wrong part? What have I done? And I kept saying to myself, it has to be the brakes. But it wasn't. You see, it didn't have to be a bracket on the catalytic converter was falling off, and it was going like this, and it was shaking. You see, it was both. I had done the brakes, but it wasn't the brakes, it was something else. It could be both, that God would bless people, but God would send his servant to die. Saul killed Christians because God always blesses them. In Acts 26:9, it talks about, this is where Paul is before Festus. And this is what I did in Jerusalem. Not only did I lock up many of the saints in prison, having received authority from the chief priests, but also when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. And as I punished them often in the synagogues, I tried to force them to blaspheme. And being furiously enraged at them, I kept pursuing them, even to foreign cities. While I was so engaged as I was journeying to Damascus with the authority of the commission of the chief priests, I saw a light in heaven brighter than, and he fell down, and it was Jesus. And Jesus explained to him that it didn't have to be one or the other, it could be both. And all of a sudden, the lights went on for him, because he knew the Bible exceptionally well. And he knew where it talked about in Isaiah chapter 9. It talks about, and a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, and there are no end of the increase of his government, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish and uphold it with justice and righteousness, from then and on and forever. The zeal of the Lord has accomplished this. He was saying, yeah, I get that. I know that's... And then he goes on to 11. A shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. And the Spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel and strength, and the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of God. He will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what his eyes see, nor by what by what his ears hear. And he, with righteousness, will judge the poor and decide with fairness. And Paul was thinking about this, but he failed to put together the fact in verse 53, the suffering servant, where it says, he grew up before him as a tender shoot, like a root out of the parched ground, no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And like one who men hid their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our grief on himself, he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet he himself esteemed, we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was pierced through for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities. And the chastising for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. And Paul finally understood that all these stories of Joshua and Moses and David and all these stories point us to Jesus. And they finally made sense that he could be both. You could be blessed, but his servant Jesus, the one who should have been blessed the most, was cursed and stricken of God. You see, we can come to God because of this. We can recognize that God has saved us. You see, the Gibeonites were the only tribe who desired to make a treaty. And the Gibeonites and Rahab are that picture for us. That picture of God redeeming us. No business redeeming a prostitute. No business redeeming the people that should have been destroyed, but God did it because they sought him. And we should seek him too. We should remember that God loves us so much that he sent his only Son to die on the cross so that we could be saved. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you that you save us. We are redeemed because of you. All these stories point to your coming and saving